Hi guys, I was going to do a regular plan care vlog again this week, but then I saw a post on Reddit this morning and it gave me some ideas for a Q&A. This is specifically Monstera, pretty much just deliciosa, but a few of the other Monstera also will fit in. I'll explain that whenever. When it comes to easy care plants, I don't think you can really go wrong with Monstera deliciosa. They are extremely chilled. They're also extremely difficult to kill. You can overwater them when they die, but if you want a plant that you can neglect quite a lot, they are generally quite good. So yeah, I've just come up with 10 questions that I think are quite common, that I see people ask a lot, and I thought I'd just put them together. So the first question is, can you grow a Monstera in water forever? We know that you can propagate them in water, but this is can they live in water? And the answer is yes, they can. To be honest, most plants you can grow in water forever. And Monstera grow really well in water, as long as you either aerate or change the water a lot, so there's plenty of oxygen in it, and you add some sort of nutrients, they'll grow really well. So mine grow in my aquarium and it grows really, really well. The issue with Monstera specifically is they're big and they're heavy and they can be hard to keep upright. I don't really have a solution for that, other than, we have a big piece of bogwood that our tire constellation has attached its roots to, so that props it up. But it's like keeping plants staked in lacquer. It's just difficult because there's nothing to anchor it to. The only thing I can suggest is using some sort of aquarium safe silicone to stick a moss ball to the bottom of the pot. That's pretty much all I can come up with. But in terms of whether or not it will be perfectly healthy for them, yeah, it will. As long as you, as I say, change the water and add some sort of nutrient, it should be fine. I don't add nutrients because the fish poo is the nutrient, but something like the FloraGrow series or Dynagrow, you can use. I wouldn't recommend using just regular houseplant fertilizer because water, if you use it in just water, the plants can have trouble uptaking some of the minerals or something. It doesn't work as well. As to whether it's better than soil, it depends a lot on the way that you care for it. If you are changing the water out a lot and keeping it fed, it will grow really, really well. It will grow as well as it grows in soil. There's not really any reason that it shouldn't. Question 2 is, do Monstera like to be pot bound? And the answer to this is actually yes. There aren't many plants that don't like to be snug in their pot. If you have too much soil and not enough root, it's a really easy way to give your plant root rot because the water can't dry out, the soil can't dry out quick enough and the plant rots. Monstera in particular do quite well if they're in a big pot and not a lot of roots. So I'm not saying that if it's not root bound it won't do well, but what it will do is it will grow roots rather than leaves until it is root bound. So whilst it won't die if you put it in too big of a pot, it will do its best to fill that pot out with roots. And whilst I wouldn't recommend letting it get super root bound, it doesn't really seem to bother them that much. I've had Monstera that were literally breaking out of the plastic pots and it was just roots, there was barely any soil left. But as long as you get enough water into it, you might have to soak the roots, because if there's not a lot of soil, my hands are really dry, it won't soak up, there won't be enough water in the soil to get to the roots, but you can just bottom water and that should sort out that problem. So in general, Monstera aren't that bothered as to how they're potted, but you might find that if they are in too big of a pot, they won't grow leaves very quickly. They'll just concentrate on growing roots. Question 3, why do Monstera drip water? Now, a lot of plants do this, especially what are they called? Aroids. They guttate, which means they take up water from the roots and then they're too much water and then they squeeze it out of the leaves. I don't have any plants near me that are doing it, but a lot of plants do it. But Monstera seem to do it a lot. The only ones that do it more, I think, are alocasia. And because guttation can be a sign of overwatering, it can be quite worrying, especially if you're new, and especially if you've spent a lot of money on a Monstera. You're it's dripping a lot, is it overwatered? I can't tell you that it's not overwatered, but I will tell you that they do tend to guttate a lot. They definitely will the day after you water them, but they can keep going for a couple of weeks. I don't know why, they just do. It is perfectly natural, like they will do it whether, you know, they do it in the wild, and if you water it and you haven't watered it for a long time and you don't think you've given it a lot of water, it may still guttate. It's not a sign of overwatering, it just can be. Question 4 is how to stake Monstera. This can be difficult because they typically have a messy growth pattern just because of all the aerial roots and stuff, and it's because they're designed to grow up a tree. So ideally, you'd want to be growing them up a tree. And you can grow them up a moss bowl, but like they're pretty skinny, so you're not gonna like, a moss bowl is not the same as a tree. The only thing you can do is try to stake it, and that isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. The only tips I can give you is don't be too rough with it because the stems can snap. Please excuse my t-shirt, this is my hair dye t-shirt. If you use like the rubberized wire stuff, what I would do is cut a longer length than you need, so you don't tie, if you feel like you want to change the shape of your plant a lot, tie it loosely and then gradually tighten it as it sort of moves. And don't stake the petioles, only stake the stem. I mean, you can stake the petioles, but petioles don't really change the shape of the plant. If there's one petiole that you're like, that might look better staked, then do it, but it's the stem that you want to be staking. So the stem is the thick bit, it's that bit. Whereas the petiole, you're not helping. So the petiole is the bit that attaches the leaf to the stem, but it's the actual stem. And that can be annoying, and I'll show you why. Right, so say I wanted to stake this plant. Please excuse my messy room. This is the stem I've got to work with. It is that long, so like that long. So it's pretty much spanning like my little finger to my thumb. That's, you know, it's that big. If you compare that, we're going to change my other hand to my other hand. They're the same size. My hands are the same size. 1, 2. It's probably about 3 times as long, and I could stake that, but that wouldn't make any difference to the shape the plant grew, to like the way it grows. This is growing straight up, but the new leaf is going to come here and the stem's going to continue. So it's this bit that I would need to stake. But the issue is, right, so this isn't straight, like it's not vertical, but I can't move it without snapping it. I would have to repot it like on its side because I'm using these aerial roots to keep it supported. Got a little tiny leaf. You're gonna, it's not gonna. Anyway, I've got a little tiny leaf just about to come out there. But yeah, that's the issue. We have, oh look at those ruffles. We have a lot of petiole and a little bit of stem. So that is one of the issues that you come up with when staking Monstera. And unfortunately, there's not really a lot you can do about it. You can't, as far as I'm aware, there's no way to encourage stem growth as opposed to leaf growth. You just have to kind of wait. And I'm guessing, like in a little plant, in a younger plant, where does the sun come out now? We've had no sun for weeks. In a little plant, the petioles aren't as ridiculously long, but as they grow, I'm guessing it's to do with getting light. The petioles just get ridiculous, as the leaves also get ridiculous sized, so. Right, that leads us on to our next question, which is how to take a Monstera cutting. I was going to say this is specific to Monstera deliciosa, but it would actually probably be easier to show you on my Adansonii. Right, so this plant I wouldn't take a cutting of. It basically is a cutting at this point. I couldn't really separate these two leaves, they're too close to each other. But if I was, basically you need a node, which are where these lines are, and if you need an easy way to find out where the nodes are, look for an aerial root, because they come out of nodes. You do not need an aerial root to propagate a Monstera. However, if you have an aerial root, you know you do have a node, which you do need. This is my Monstera Adansonii. You will recognise it if you saw my last vlog. Growing very, very nicely. This is it's a little bit easier, so I could cut off You can see all these little lines, and these are all nodes, so you can just take any kind of cutting. Sort of there, whatever, and you'd be good. These propagate really easily in an aero garden, just to let you know. So if you don't have an aero garden, the conditions are basically well aerated water and a lot of sun. So yeah, but in general, I can't really speak for Monstera Adamsonia because I've only really propagated them in an aero garden. But Monstera deliciosa are a great first plant to propagate because they root really, really well in soil. Not quickly, but well, in that if you take a cutting and just shove it in soil, it will tend to root. I've never had one that hasn't. What the hell is this light? There's a weird cloud passing over. So you could always try like one in leca, one in soil, one in water, but you can't just shove it straight back in the soil. Just gonna put this Adansonii down. If you have a really sparse, like leggy is just like when you've got a lot of space between the nodes, Monstera, you can put the, I don't know why I'm laughing, it is not funny at all. You can put the cutting back in with the mother plant. However, Monstera are one of those plants that you seem to have a baby one and then all of a sudden it is enormous and you don't know what to do with it. And once you have two in one, that grows even quicker, obviously, grows twice as fast. But trying to detangle the roots is a nightmare. So you can end up with a massive plant needing a massive pot quite quickly. And that sounds like a good idea, but it's difficult enough to stake Monstera on their own, never mind having to sort out two. So I would tend to do it separately. I've accidentally ran two questions together there, how to take a Monstera cutting and how to propagate Monstera. So I'll just talk a little bit more about propagating Monstera. Monstera propagate pretty easily, but due to their tendency to want to have a certain amount of root before growing plants, it can seem like it takes forever, but it is something that if you persevere and just keep at it, it will seem to grow quite quickly. It just takes a while to get going. I've also found that the variegated types don't like any kind of upset. So if you bring it home and you're worried it's not growing, I mean, not even a propagation, like a full plant, it may just need time to settle down. And my Thai constellation needed, it's settled now. I'd say it settled about 4 months ago, so nearly a year. So just as long as it's not dying, don't worry about it. It will settle down. It's just, you know, a bit of a drama queen. So yeah, so as I said, they propagate really well in soil, and one of the benefits of soil, because one of the issues with Monstera is they are heavy and big and tall, the soil will keep them up, whereas in water, you have to keep them upright, and it can be a pain. I mean, to be honest, something as simple as Jesus, why is it so bright? What was that gonna do? Does that do anything? Not really. No, that's not better. Do you know? Right, see, now I've left my questions over there. You wait, so this looks very kind of Zoom backgroundy. Right, where are we? Why are Monstera expensive? I genuinely believe Monstera are expensive because people charge what they think. There's almost like this collective view that Monstera are expensive. So plant shops think they can charge more for them. I think that's changing. I really don't like this. Is too dark. No. Oh my god. Lighting's hard. So there's almost, because there's this like idea that Monstera is so expensive, people charge a lot, and then when people see the extortionate prices, they're like, oh well, that's just how much they cost. No, They're extremely cheap. They're literally an invasive species in like a lot of countries, like the USA. I can only think of the USA and Australia, but they are big countries. I'm sure like Southeast Asia as well has a problem with monsteras like just rocking up. So if you live there, just go into the wild and take one. They're an invasive species, so as far as I'm aware, you shouldn't be told off for that. Just make sure you've got a monstera and not like a golden pothos or something. But also, I think people sort of hear about variegated monstera being expensive, and if they don't know what variegated means, they'll see a regular one and be like, oh, that's why they're expensive. They're expensive. You know, I saw somebody paid £1,000 for one, so this one's 100, so that's a really good deal. No. If you want like a statement plant to live in a sort of dreary-ish corner, you may need to fork out on this is not a great angle. You may need to fork out on a slightly more expensive plant, but if you have good light, this is terrible. They grow pretty quick after the initial settling in phase. So you could probably just grow one on. There is an issue of supply and demand. No, there's not. There isn't an issue with supply. There are plenty of monstera. There's plenty of variegated monstera, so there are definitely plenty of green ones. But because demand is so high, the supply is kind of controlled. So the market isn't flooded, because if the market floods, we'll all buy one. Or even if half of us buy one and everybody gives their friend a cutting, then that's not good for the garden centres. So that, yeah, it's kind of engineered. I mean, a lot of products are, so. I have got an article on my website about cheap, it's plant shops on Etsy that sell Monstera cheap. I will link it below. I've not updated in a while, so the plant shops may not be going, but may not still be there, but I'm pretty sure they should be. I picked like pretty big ones in America. I've not done it for the UK because you can buy Monstera in Tesco. We don't really have that supply and demand issue, but that I've seen. But then there are certain plants that were extremely expensive in America that never really reached that height here. So Philodendron Pink Princess, we just didn't really get them over here that very much. Even, you know, if you wanted to search one out, you could get one, but they kind of went from, as soon as they came on the market, we could get them quite cheap. As soon as they like hit regular garden centres, a bit like Dragon Scale Alocasia, we weren't involved when they were like 300 quid. We just got them as soon as they became mass produced. So basically Monstera aren't expensive, and don't spend a lot of money on one. If you can't find one, I genuinely can't think that you wouldn't be able to find one. Like, look on Facebook Marketplace, people are always giving them away because they're massive, and once they hit a certain age, they start just throwing out aerial roots and attaching to everything, so people get sick of them. So yeah, just be patient, look in garden centres, ask your mates for cuttings, don't pay a fortune for a Monstera, especially a green one. The variegated ones, prices change a lot really, really quickly, so it responds a lot to like market forces. So things like coronavirus really push stuff like that back, because obviously we've got other priorities in our lives. But if you're looking for rare plants, Monstera are not rare. Even like plants like Monstera obliqua. Obliqua is still rare, but not nearly as rare as it once was, because the hobby has kind of brought it into the forefront. So obliqua are still technically rare, but they aren't impossible to get hold of. Adansonii are not rare. However, because they look enough like an obliqua to a layperson, they're often sold as obliqua. If you have a Monstera Adansonii that you suspect is an obliqua, it isn't. It just isn't. That wouldn't happen. Right, so question 8. Why do Monstera leaves split? Monstera leaves split when the plant reaches a certain age, because when it reaches a certain age, it will also have reached a certain size, and the lower leaves will not get so much light. So they develop the splits in the leaves so the light can penetrate down to the lower leaves. So if you have a very young Monstera, you won't have splits in the leaves. And if you put a very young Monstera in a dark place, it also will not get splits on its leaves, however old you let it grow, because it doesn't need them. It's not that it's unhealthy. I see this a lot. It isn't unhealthy. It just hasn't reached the potential it could have done. It may be perfectly happy, but if it's growing in a room that doesn't have not even enough light, because it has enough, it can have enough light to stay alive, but it just wouldn't need the splits in the leaves, often because they grow leggy, so the petioles are really long, so all the leaves can get as much light as it just doesn't need them. I don't know how it knows. I assume it can't know. Unless the leaves reach a certain size, they don't split because they're not blocking the light, so it's not going to be an issue. On the same kind of topic, you could get a plant that split a bit. It might get like the cuts in the size, like this, but it might not get the holes like that because it just doesn't need them. This is, it's not even mature. It you know, it's doing okay, but you can get double rows of holes, and I'm going to say something quite controversial. Now, it is what I think, but also I've not really formulated this opinion. I just read one thing and I was like, that sounds right. There is no difference between Monstera deliciosa and the Borsigiana. They are the same plant. And the article I'm referring to that made me think, yeah, that's probably right, is Kew Gardens did genetic tests on them. They're all the same. Even the large form, small form, it isn't a genetic difference. It's more likely to be, and it's a small plant. This plant is a small plant. Like, you know how some people are taller than other people? It's just a difference. But with a plant, if you change the conditions, basically if you have a small plant and you give it enough light and sort of the stuff that it needs, it could grow really big leaves. It's not fixed like our height is. And you can fight amongst yourselves about that if you want. I don't care about it enough to argue. But what I don't want is people thinking they've got a Borsigiana, thinking that it's not going to grow big leaves, and then shelling out a fortune for a big one, when you could potentially stick a couple of grow lights on it and grow it massive, like the plant you've already got. What I love about it is Kew proper thought they were like, this is correct, we've done like DNA analysis on it, and everyone's still like, you're wrong. You are wrong. And I don't know why, I can't fathom caring enough. But then I also don't get like purebred dogs versus like mongrel dogs. I just don't care. As long as dogs don't bite me, I'm really not that bothered. And you know, they can breathe properly. Surely that's the important thing. Right, question 9. Do Monstera clean the air? No. This is one of those things that everyone was like, plants clean the air, and then they were like, plants don't clean the air. And now I think we've settled on plants do kill the air. Plants do clean the air a tiny, tiny amount. But if you buy plants because you don't think your air is clean enough, please go and buy an air purifier, because that will clean your air. The Amazon rainforest is very good for air cleaning, but it's also really, really big. So unless you want to cram your room full of plants, which sounds lovely, but I wouldn't recommend, because if you got like pests, you never get rid of them. So no, Monstera don't clean the air, but neither do any other plants. Spider plants tend to be the one that clean the air the most, but again, they don't clean the air a significant amount at all. Peace lilies as well, but like knowing peace lilies, I think they started that rumour themselves, proper up themselves. So no, they don't. And question 10, do Monstera like direct sunlight? Now, interestingly, this is the question that prompted me doing this video, because somebody on Reddit put, it wasn't even a Monstera, it was a Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, and they said, this plant has grown so much, but it's got these like brown marks on the leaves. Like, I know it's healthy because it's growing, but what is it like? Is it sunburnt? Should I move it? No, I don't think it was sunburnt. It looked It looked like these marks, but that can be anything. These, I mean, this, it would look like overwatering, but I know it's not overwatered. It's just, I don't know what it is, but it's not stopped the plant growing. I think it's just like an old leaf thing. It might be a little bit of fungus or something, but it's nothing that's gonna damage. I mean, it's damaged those bits of the leaves, but it's not spreading. It's fine. So basically, you can give a plant so much light that it burns and it will still grow more, because a lot of plants, so this is not a natural environment for plants. A lot of tropical plants grow in the rainforest where they've got leaf cover. The canopy is above them. Enough light shines through, and it's at the equator, so the sun's quite, I mean, you know, relatively close compared to here. So they've got quite bright sunlight, but it's literally filtered through the leaves. That's the bright indirect light thing that we all crave so much. But the plants still, a lot of them are climbing up the other trees using their aerial roots to get more light, because the more light they get, the bigger they grow, which is why, you know, this bad boy will have had a lot of light to get like this. And as they climb up, you know, they develop things to help the light dissipate to the other leaves, like the slits. But this is an invasive species. They will grow, as long as it's warm enough, they will grow anywhere. You see them, and I mention this a lot, but you see them growing up palm trees, really tall palm trees in Florida, completely exposed to the elements. Every leaf will be burnt to a crisp, apart from the few at the top. But the plant doesn't care, because it doesn't need those other leaves. You know, they're old news. It's got the cringe. It doesn't need those other leaves. It's got the new growth, and all it cares about is that the plant is growing. And as it gets closer to the sun, the leaves get bigger and bigger, and it just gets more and more energy. It's more energy than it needs. It's more energy than it was genetically designed, like, than it evolved to ever get, because as far as the base genetic level, Monsteras didn't know they were ever going to leave the rainforest. You know, they didn't know that some dude was like, I'm going to put that in my house. So these plants are dealing with a lot more light than they ever needed. But it's good for them. They're just like, yes! Not realising that they don't look aesthetically pleasing, because that isn't something that's important to them. It's important to us because we brought them into our house. So we're like, it looks crap. It's got brown marks on it. But if you look at plants in the wild, they quite often look like shit. We just don't tend to notice, because that's, you know, we see plants in nature all the time. We don't actually look at each individual leaf like we do the ones in our house. Aesthetics to a plant aren't important. All it cares about is getting a lot of light. And the fact that there is a lot of light makes it grow faster and bigger. Yeah, the rest of its leaves are dying, but it doesn't really care, because it doesn't need them anymore. The leaves serve a purpose. It's not there to look good. It's there to grow and reproduce. That's also why variegated Monstera often look really, really shabby. It's because those white parts, they look cool to us. I don't know if it's because it's unusual or something about it really, humans really like it, but it doesn't benefit the plant. So as to so the question was, do Monstera like direct sunlight? Yeah, they do, because it enables them to grow really fast and really big. I suspect what people actually want to know is, will I like it if my Monstera has direct sunlight? Depends on how much. I mean, you could get direct sunlight here and it's still not that hot and it's not that bright. If you lived in Florida, it's a different story. You need to acclimate it properly. If you just shove it out on a hot day, it will literally burn to a crisp, the whole thing, and then it will just be dead. Well, the leaves will be dead. You'll have to cut it off. The roots will be fine. But if you slowly add more light, you know, if you move it to a south-facing window, put up a sheer curtain and let it acclimate, and then gradually take away the curtain, you'll get a lot of big, healthy growth, but you might get burn marks on it. So bright indirect light is best. Sometimes the plant really likes bright light and it won't burn. I don't know if that's just because it's been acclimated well, or if some plants are stronger than others, like some specimens are stronger than others. It will depend a lot on, you know, how hot your sun is. But Your plants will love direct sunlight, but they also won't care if they burn. It's you that cares, so you just have to kind of balance it. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. Sorry I'm so breathy, I don't know. Bloody long COVID. If you have any other questions, please leave them below and I will answer them. If there are enough, I'll do another video. If not, I'll just reply. I'll reply to your comment anyway. So yeah, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you next week. Bye.